You're listening to episode 12 of the Confident Rider podcast with Jane Pike. Hello, glorious human. Welcome back to Podcast Land. It is fabulous to hang out with you today. We are going to be chatting with Kathy Price, who is a fabulous friend of mine hailing from Wales. And as luck would have it, we were in California at the same time when I was there recently. We were actually flatmates. I'm not sure if that's what you would call it. RV mates. We shared an RV over the course of the 4 days at the expo and then proceeded to hang out for the following week. And Kathy also came to my workshop that I held over the weekend with Robin Schiller. We just had a rocking good time, basically. Kathy does some amazing work, which I got to see in person. She worked with Mustang Maddie's horses at the expo, and Maddie herself was really complimentary about the effects that she had on the Mustangs and the difference that she noticed when she took them out into the arena. Her website is Kathy Price, Kathy, Price, Price.co.uk, and you can read up all about her there. But Kathy's business or work is called Point of Balance, and she does a very specific form of energy work that really facilitates healing in both animals and humans. I will leave her to describe it because I think she'll do a much better job than I just have. But really looking forward to you listening to our conversation, and I hope you get a lot out of it. So let's get on with that now. It's Friday here, and I am sitting with Kathy Price, fabulous Kathy Price, who has been tolerating me for close to 2 weeks now. We're both staying with the Schillers, Robin and Warwick Schiller, in California. And we've come from opposite sides of the world, pretty much. I am, well, you know where I'm coming from. I'm coming from New Zealand, but Kathy is coming from Wales, and we've known each other online for ages now, huh?
Yeah, a couple of years at least.
Yeah, and I considered you a friend prior to meeting up, so it's been really nice to meet up in person. I have nabbed Kathy today because she is an energy worker extraordinaire. That's not her official title, but that's the one that I've given to her. And it's been really awesome over the time that we've had together to both experience Kathy's work and to see her working firsthand with humans and with horses. So do you want to start by telling us a little bit about the work that you do and anything really? Kind of give us an introduction to how you roll.
Okay, well, firstly, it's lovely to be here with you, and it's such a joy to spend this time. As you said, we've been friends online, but yeah, it's been really cool, so thank you for that. Yes, where to start? I'm a scientist by training, science degree. And never in a million years did I think I'd end up doing this work. If you couldn't explain it, measure it and replicate it, don't bother telling me about it, was my sort of thought process. But the horses decided to change that for me. One horse in particular who showed me that I had to find a different way to be with her. And I ended up at a horsemanship clinic back in about 2002, I think it was, in the hills of Wales, with a horseman named Len Judd, who was an Australian working out of America but came over to Wales. And that was the turning point for me, that whole clinic. I don't know exactly what happened, but it was nothing to do with training horses. Ended up like a spiritual experience. And from that moment, my search began. As soon as I came home from the clinic, I started reading books on a wide variety of subjects, from psychic experiences to healing. I didn't know what I was looking for. And then one day, a book opened up on a certain page. There's a surprise. As I glanced through it in a bookshop. And it described what happens sometimes when people have an attunement when they study Reiki. And basically what can happen when you're attuned was exactly what had happened at the horse clinic previously. And I just wanted more of that. And that was the sole reason I started studying Reiki. Complete self-interest. I wanted more.
So was the motivation for yourself at that point, or was it for your horse, or a combination of both, or it was just something happened which led you to understand how things happen on a much more subtle but powerful level?
Without doubt, to begin with, it was self-interest, because it was such an amazing experience. I thought, if I can have more of that, that's where I want to go. But once I started studying Reiki, it was amazing. I so enjoyed it. And people got benefit from it. The horses got benefit from it. And so I entered the world of what you might call energy work, energy healing, whatever term you wish to use. So, yes, it was initially self-interest, but then it moved on to how can I help others?
I find this so fascinating, those moments of epiphany that you hear quite a lot in terms of stories, especially when we're in relationship with our horses, that even if we've come from what I now describe as a very transactional perspective, where you're out there, you're wanting to do this and this to get this result with your horse, and you're led into this transformational place. So, and I know this is a really tricky question, but when you describe having an epiphany, what does that mean? Does it mean that you were all of a sudden introduced to looking at things from a different perspective, or did he introduce a way of going about things that you hadn't considered, or how did that come to be?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think, looking back, I went from being just a physical rider and realising how much energetic stuff was involved, because Len would be talking about the energy and how the horse was reacting to things, something that had never entered my consciousness before. And it was mind-blowing because I could see it really clearly, and we didn't do much horsemanship. He kept demonstrating what these horses were looking at, feeling, how they were reacting to different energies. So yes, I think it was my realisation that there was a much more subtle way of being, and that's what changed me.
Very cool. Very
cool.
Yeah. So the Reiki was the point that you started at, and for many people listening at the moment will be familiar or have heard of Reiki in some shape or form, but do you want to give the elevator pitch for Reiki, what that means or what that work encompasses?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to give sort of my version. I've no doubt there's probably an official description of Reiki, but you're working with life energy, the chi, the ki, whatever you want to call it, and it's about balancing and working in certain areas. And Reiki the Reiki that I studied had quite in some ways, strict formula that you worked in certain ways. There were words and there were symbols, and it was great. I went through the 3 levels. I did the qualification, if you like, to become a Reiki master, but I never actually really stepped into it because basically I'm lazy. And so there was part of me that kept thinking, do I really have to do all the ritual? And it's not knocking it at all. It was my path. And so I started looking again then, once I'd worked with Reiki, I had clients, but the journey continued.
Yeah.
So, I started looking for more, and I found another modality called quantum touch, which I really enjoyed, but that still wasn't it. And then I suppose 5 years after the Epiphany, I found something called reconnective healing. And that, for me, was the turning point completely.
And that's what you're essentially practicing now?
Yeah, I definitely called myself a reconnective healing practitioner for several years. But now I feel I've stepped into, I'm me, the sum of everything that I've done and who I am. So I don't use that title anymore. But my work is very much aligned with those principles.
Yeah, I can so appreciate that, because I was having this conversation with you as well, that I've trained in a variety of different techniques or ways of going about things, from a psychotherapy perspective, and then NLP and hypnosis and my yoga therapy and breathwork training. But if I get described as one of those things distinctly, like Jane's an NLP coach or she's a hypnotherapist, it feels so wrong because it's a melting pot. Like, it's not so much that I draw from those different things, but it feels like everything's actually been thrown into the concrete mixer.
That's exactly
And then it's also life experience and your own understanding and work that comes to form this alchemy of sorts that informs your practice. So I totally get, although we're not practicing the same thing in essence, I completely understand that idea that it becomes, after you develop a certain level of technical proficiency, in inverted commas, you're free to move into the artistry of it, I guess.
Yeah. I look at my work as a philosophy, a science and an art, because there's a lot of information behind it, which I study with great zeal. You know, I've read so many books ranging, as I said, from sort of psychic to healing to quantum physics to working with horses and anything and everything in between. And then the art form is the way you carry it out. And then the science, which I love, certainly haven't forgotten my scientific roots, is to try and find out how it works. And that's slightly an ongoing journey.
Yeah, it is. And a practice, hey?
Yeah,
like, it's something that you step into every day. That's so beautiful. Energy is a word that we hear a lot in horsemanship and horse training, you know, like especially in relation to groundwork, like raise your energy, or the term is thrown around with wild abandon in lots of places, and there's lots of different interpretations of what that actually means. So when you're referring to energy, what is it that you're referring to?
Again, a really good question. I think for me, it's the fundamental, it is the life energy. It's the means of connection as well between two systems. Because my work is about bringing about balance within a system, and the system could be an animal or a person or even a plant. And for me, balance, when you can get to balance, you're at perfect health, and you can work at your optimum place. So my work is all about bringing energy, light, and information into the system. So the energy, you could say it's electromagnetic frequency, it's aligned in some ways with that, but I honestly don't know if we in the scientific world have actually got a true description or a quantifiable measurement of what the energy I'm talking about actually is.
And in terms of your role as a practitioner or a facilitator, is, to put it in layman's terms, and I know that this is hard to have a conversation about sometimes because the actual labelling of it feels so inadequate, but would you describe that when we're out of balance or our horses are out of balance in some way, either systemically, physically or emotionally, that there is blockage the right word, or...
Yeah, I think you definitely, what you're saying is true, but it can just be a lack of energy, a draining of energy, definitely a blockage so that things don't flow. My job is not to diagnose. I don't decide or diagnose at all because I don't know. The system I'm working with, I believe, does. And obviously with a person, it's on a very subconscious level. That, you know, if we could bring ourselves back into balance, we would every day. But things happen, stuff gets in the way. And like you said, energy can get blocked. So you haven't got the flow. So my job is to try and help whatever system I'm working with find what it needs to come back into flow and into balance. And that's primarily how I work as a facilitator, which I find is a really good job. I do not say I'm a healer because I don't know what's wrong with the person or the horse, and I'm not deciding what they need. I'm just trying to facilitate them finding the information or the energy or the light that they need to bring themselves back into balance.
That's very cool. It's wonderful. I use the description, or I talk a lot about our energetic boundaries, which is it's almost represented by our personal comfort zone. And I know that in a couple of the clinics on the weekend at the expo, you would have heard me talk about this, but I just wanted to throw this into the mix because I know there'll be 50% of the people listening that are totally on board and like, yes, this is the shiz and let's get into it. And 50% have that skeptical brain where it's like, oh, yeah, maybe a little bit much for me. But so the way that I like to think of it that makes it really tangible is that, you know, apart from my belief that we're very much energetic beings and we're able to function on that intentional and energetic level if we're tuned into it in terms of actually altering our physical experience, the reality is we have an energetic zone around us and our horses have an energetic zone around us, which we might describe in a different way or as your comfort zone. And if you're in the supermarket, for instance, or at a bar or a restaurant and you're a woman and a man leans into your zone who you're not familiar with, you'll become acutely aware of where your energetic zone is, where your comfort zone is. And so that thinking in that way and thinking about our horses having that energetic zone is really useful to me because you see how much you're able to affect and even manipulate your own physicality through the actual boundary that represents around you. Yeah. And I know that that's different to what it is that we're discussing, but it just gets you thinking about how we're not only physical, you know, like it's perhaps a totally inadequate way of explaining it, but
I think it's a really good way of people that maybe are not into this world of energy and you know, I'm a skeptic. I certainly don't accept things firsthand. The universe has thrown things at me that have made me open my eyes and gone, well, I cannot deny that. And my whole philosophy, the whole way I work is that my experience is now my truth because I cannot deny what has happened. But sort of going back to the energy, that's most definitely what you're talking about is part of my work, because when somebody is in health, they have a huge, vibrant energy field. So the energy field you're talking about goes out really strongly. I mean, we can measure our heart's energetic field about 6 or 8 foot away from the body. And that's limited by the instruments that we actually have. Electromagnetic field is actually meant to be infinite. And this is the thing with horses. How far can they sense it? It's part of their innate ability because of their being a prey animal. That their
sensory acuity and energetic understanding.
They're listening to each other. That's why one's on guard and the rest can graze, because they know they'll pick it up immediately if there's any danger. But for my work, it's about balancing that field, making it stronger. And I mean, another example is if you've walked into a room and you've gone immediately, don't like the energy in here. Or
doesn't feel right.
And that's where your energy is not coherent with the energy in the room. And so it doesn't feel right and it cancels each other out. But there are other times when you meet someone for the first time and it's a joy. You feel like you've known them all your life. You're completely happy with them, and that's you resonating with them, your energy.
Well, the intuition as well, like the intuitive side of it and the energetic side of it, if we think about that aspect of ourselves, and I talk about the 4 intelligences with like intuition, logical intelligence, physical and emotional intelligence. We're very much trained out of those intelligences, and to an extent they've become, in some areas, unacceptable to express or seen as unreliable, untrustworthy, fluffy, you know, all of those things, which is dismissive of anything which isn't like solid in terms of what we understand as to be solid. So when we get to like the quantum level of feeling it, and this is where I get really excited and feel like I only know like a tiny bit that I can express adequately. This is where the real exciting part of your work comes in, isn't it? Like, because we're tapping into that quantum field.
That's my belief. Again, I can't prove anything. I really wish I could. I really wish I had the resources to do so many experiments. But for me, it is all about the quantum field. And that when I work, I actually condition the space that the system I'm working with, be it a person or a horse or a dog or whatever, is in. So that my understanding and my belief is that by conditioning the space, it makes the system It makes it easier for the system to pick up the information it needs to return to balance. And it reminds the system of where balance is. And the analogy I often use is that if I had decided there were 40 books that this person needed to read that could help them find balance, and I put them in a huge pile, chucked any which way behind the door, and I opened the door and I said to the person, well, there's the answer. You could see that that was going to be quite a task, and the chances are they wouldn't take it on. However, my work is about ordering those books, if you like, into very easily found answers. So, the most pertinent book might be first, and it might already be opened on the page, and then the next book, and then the next book. That's order. And so that the system can then walk into the door, through the door, pick the book up and get the information. This is just an analogy. But the other thing that you've got to remember is I can't make anything happen. And this is a very, very important part of my work, is that I can open the door and everything's set out beautifully, but there's no point opening the door with my left hand and pushing them through with the right hand. If somebody or a horse or whatever is not ready to pick that information up, I can't make them. And in my humble opinion, nobody can. Because if they could, one drug would cure headaches.
Yeah.
One person could do energy work.
Yeah.
And bring someone back into balance. But everybody is so different. There are so many nuances that it's all I can do is step back with no attachment to any result and just do my work. And if there's an amazing change, and I've been so blessed that some horses have had it, it's nothing to do with me. I've just got to be the facilitator. And likewise, if I do the same work and nothing happens, it's nothing to do with me. As long as I've been that clear facilitator, they might not be ready to step into that space and take the information on board.
So when it comes to working with horses and people, do you notice, and is this even possible to quantify, is it easier, in inverted commas, tripped over my words, to notice a change in horses as opposed to humans?
I mean, generally, yes, because horses are pure. They've got no expectation. I'm just a person standing there. Some horses take no notice of me whatsoever. One classic example was a horse, an owner had asked me to come and look at a horse that was extremely anxious in the stable. And it was in a big American barn. It would never settle down. Every time someone took a horse out, it was going loopy-doo, and it just wouldn't rest. And I went and gave it a session. And I call things sessions, not treatments, because I don't know what's wrong with the animal. So I'm not treating anything. It's a session as far as I'm concerned. Anyway, I was stood in there. I had the owner in there with the horse, because sometimes I feel there's a real... something's going on closely between the owner and the horse, and they both need what I call a zap. That's a technical term, a zap. And this horse took absolutely no notice. It mowed me down God knows how many times. But I did what I did, and I walked out. And then the next day she phoned me and she said that he was fast asleep, he'd calmed down. So they don't need to take any notice of me, but generally I find horses react much more clearly to the frequencies that when I start work with them. They're much more sensitive and much more clear. And the other thing is that, as far as I'm concerned, change happens faster than the speed of light. And that I don't need to be stood there for an hour. But with a person, there's so many other layers involved in expectation. I've paid for this. You can't make a change that quickly.
Yeah.
And that's fine. No problem at all. We have a set amount of time. I work that amount of time. So, yeah, there are differences.
It is a belief that we set up that change will be hard work, or this is going to take a long time. And that's even something that I pre-frame in Joyride, where it's like, well, this is a skill and skills are learned, and chances are it might take you a while, but it actually might not.
Yeah.
You can't,
don't set them up for...
let's not presuppose that it's going to take a really long time. We have been, just this last weekend gone and a couple of days before that, at the Western States Horse Expo together, and you had the chance to work on some Mustangs.
Oh, yeah.
over that period of time, which was pretty profound.
Pretty
Do you want to
awesome.
talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, they were amazing. I didn't know what to I didn't set up an expectation, but it started off that one of the Mustangs was very anxious about being in the stall because they're used to being out in the pasture, and that obviously they come off the plane. So I said to Maddie, whose horses they were, would she like me to work with one? And it was amazing. He was eating his hay nets tied outside the stalls, and he was eating his hay net, and within 2 or 3 minutes of me starting to work, and I work hands off generally, and sometimes 10, 12 feet away, because you just work in the field. That's all you're on about, and you're not working in a particular area. He started to I call it going in the zone. And anyone who's seen a horse relax and let go, you'll see them blinking and their muscles around their nose twitching, and then they might give a big yawn or lick and chew or stretch. So he went in the zone for 5-10 minutes, whatever, and then he licked and chewed. And I always let the horses dictate. That might have been the end of the session then. If he'd have gone back to eating his hay net and sort of gone, I'm back in the room, that would have been it. But no. And then he did another layer. And I think he did that 7 or 8 times. I took photos of him and was filming his nose, because this is part of my work now, that I really want to show people what actually happens so I can illustrate. It doesn't have to happen. That has to be very clear, but it's very interesting when it does. So he was the first one, and then the next one I did was mind-blowing. He was not anxious in the store, but I felt I had to do him, and he just went really deep. And I'm getting to the stage now, and this is getting really woo-woo, that sometimes I get information, if you like. There's things that I want to write down that come to me. Mm-hmm. So I did write this stuff down, and it was about between him and his owner. And I didn't know the horse at all. I didn't know his history or whatever. But when I actually told Maddie what I'd written down, I showed her what I'd written down, it was absolutely on the nose about this horse, how he was the leader, and he really was trying to help Maddie, and he took a lot on board, a lot on his shoulders. It was amazing. It was a really profound experience. So I'm so blessed to be able to do it. I'm so blessed. Everyone teaches me something new.
It's a wonderful experience. So when you go home, because both of us are here for a short period of time, we're on holidays.
Yes.
We've got the clinic this weekend, and then you're back to Wales on Tuesday. Mm-hmm. So the work that you do, that's something that people can access if they don't live in Wales, or do they have to be physically near you?
No, I do distance work very regularly. Mm-hmm. And again, that's something you need. It's quite hard to get your head around. But I've been working, quite often I work with horses and people literally the other side of the world, New Zealand, Australia. Distance is no object. Distance is a physical measurement, if you like, but when you get into the field, there's no distance, and it's intention. This is the way I describe it, so that somebody rings me up, say in New Zealand, and says, I've got a problem with my horse, could you give a session? We set a time, I phone them, and I say, right, I'll start. I don't need a photo, I don't need to be on the internet. I put the phone down, I work, and then half an hour, 3/4 of an hour later, whatever, I ring them back and say I've finished. And then they might report that the horse has done something, lain down or done something different, or it's just continued grazing. Mm-hmm. And then I keep in touch, and, we see how we go. Mm-hmm. So distance is no object. It's literally a matter of sorting a time out that's convenient for both, parties.
And out of curiosity, is there a common signaler that tells you that you've finished? Or do you get the feeling
That's a good question.
That we're done now? Like what?
Yeah, well, obviously, if I'm working in person, particularly with a horse, or a dog, they quite often show me, because they'll just walk off and go, yeah, tar mate, I'm off, which is fine. And with a person, I'll generally allow a set amount of time, but there is quite often a change in the way I feel it in my hands. Okay, so I feel tingling, pulses, And they don't mean anything in particular. So I'm not going to say that, if I feel a pulsing in my right hand, it means their left leg is bad or something.
Yeah.
It's just what I feel. And quite often there is a quietening. There's something and you just, okay, that's finished.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
Yeah, that's mostly, but.
So interesting. Well, thank you so much. So if the masses of people out there fascinated, as I am fascinated with what you've talked about, want to contact you, how do they get in touch with you?
Okay, I've got a website which is www.Kathy with a K, Kathy Price, Price, all one word, .co.uk. And my email is info@kathyprice.co.uk.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, Kathy. This was really fun.
Thank you very much.
That's it from us today. Thank you so much for hanging out. It has been a pleasure, as per usual. If you're feeling particularly inspired, please feel free to share this to any of your favourite social media channels or leave a review if the fancy takes you. You can find out more about Kathy by visiting her website, Kathy Price, Kathy with a K, .co.uk, or you can visit me at confidentwriter.online. Have a fabulous day, and I'll talk to you all again soon.